Welcome back to Flipped. We are getting close to the end. I hope you had a great summer. I know some of you are getting back from vacation. Some have another vacation planned coming up, and it's been a great summer. And we've been taking a look over these few weeks on how Jesus, in these eight short statements we call the Beatitudes, or the blessings, how he kind of flips the script on the world, the way the world is seen, the way the world acts. Jesus kind of turns all that stuff kind of upside down in these little 8 statements. We've been kind of going through those one at a time. If you've missed any of those, just so you know, we have a YouTube channel. You can check those out there to kind of catch up if you missed one on vacation. Today, we're getting towards the end, right? We're going to be on the 7th of these 8. And this statement is probably one of the most practical for everyday life. I mean, not just like today, but this topic we're going to talk about today has been practical for a long, long time. It's been around for a long, long time. In fact, we have parts of it even far back as Sparta. You familiar with the Spartans? These guys back in like the 7th century BC, this great kind of warrior city-state in what's now Greece, kind of known for their discipline and all that kind of stuff. They were a very honorable people, very focused. There's a story about the Spartans at the Olympic Games where the whole group of them were sitting together, and this one older gentleman, a Greek man, wasn't a Spartan, was trying to find a seat at the games. He couldn't find a place to sit down, and no one would help him. And they're kind of like laughing at him, pointing at him, guys kind of wandering around, and when he got to the Spartan section of the arena, all the Spartans who were younger than him stood up and offered their seat. Kind of real cool thing to do. And everybody clapped for the Spartans, for doing the right thing. And then the old man said this. He said, all Greeks know what is right, but only the Spartans do it. Oh, that's pretty practical. And that you can see that being said today, right? A lot of people know what's right, and they'll applaud for what is right, but doing what is right, that's a lot more difficult, right? We're going to talk about that today too. The Spartans were also not known just for their prowess in battle and their discipline and, six-pack abs, that kind of thing. They're also known for their intellect. They were super smart. They studied philosophy, and they'd use that philosophy on the battlefield. If you've seen the movie 300, you've seen a little of that. Herodotus, a Greek historian, told a story about how when the Persians attacked, one of the Persian soldiers yelled out, "Our arrows will block out the sun," to which a Spartan soldier replied, "Great. Then we'll fight in the shade." These little kind of like, they kind of get you. You ever had those little gotcha comebacks in your life? Like, they got me. One time, a little later, Philip Macedon, a king in Greece, was going to attack Sparta. And so he sent this message: "If I win this war, you'll be slaves forever." And the Spartan king sent back a one-word answer, considered one of the best uses of language to date. If. Isn't that great? Like, ooh. In fact, Philip tried it again later. A few years later, he tried again. He said this: "Do you want me to enter your lands as a friend or foe?" And the Spartan king replied, "Neither." That's pretty good, right? I don't want you here at all. Just go away. But we have these kind of things. Later on, if you're familiar with the debates or the kind of going back and forth between Winston Churchill and Lady Astor, you've probably heard this a little bit before, where one time Lady Astor said to Winston Churchill, "If you were my husband, I would poison your coffee." To which Churchill replied, If I were your husband, I'd drink it." Churchill was really quick on his feet. He did the same thing to someone named Betsy. She said one time, "Winston, you are drunk, and what's more, you are disgustingly drunk." And Churchill replied, "My dear, you are ugly. And what's more, you're disgustingly ugly. But tomorrow I should be sober." And sometimes you hear these, you're like, "Oh, they got him. Like, got you." You're like a really good comeback. And it makes you feel good, kind of like, I got them. But all those things really come back to one problem we're going to talk about today, and that's conflict. Right? I know it feels good to have those gotcha moments when something annoys you or sets you off or offends you, to have that one statement that we can be like Winston Churchill and just kind of say the right thing to get them back and make them be quiet. We all have, I think, those moments we want to be able to be that quick-witted. But underlying those moments are these battles we get drawn into where we're faced with something that gets us hot under the collar, gets us angry, and we want to say something, and we're tempted to say the thing that'll make it worse. You ever been there? Just something that's going to make it worse. When someone busts your chops, you want to get back at them, that kind of thing. It all begins with conflict. How many of you have been involved in conflict recently? Okay, let me ask that question a different way. How many of you are people? The reality is, if you're breathing right now, you've probably encountered conflict sometime in the recent past, like probably yesterday, between maybe your family or friends, your coworkers or colleagues, maybe online, offline, personalities, politics, whatever it is, you've been faced with conflict of some sort or another recently, across the room or across the globe. It happens, and it's part of our lives. So what is it in your life? And it's all different for us. What is it in your life that gets you fired up? What is it that gets you hot under the collar? What is it that sets you off? Just think, just for a second, what is it that really, really gets you mad? You got one thing? Two things? Got a list? Some of us have lists. But the interesting thing is, those lists don't matter. Because look, everyone's got a list. Everybody's got a list of things. And they're all probably a little different, but we've all got one. And that's not really all that interesting. What's interesting, though, is how do we respond to that list? When those things happen in our lives, what do we do? How do we respond? How do the people and relationships around us, how are they affected by our response to those times when we get angry, when we're facing conflict? Well, there was a study that was done not too long ago that said there's really two basic responses to conflict. The first type of people are the avoiders. Avoiders. Those who kind of, when they are confronted with conflict or tension, what do? They run. Have you ever seen Monty Python's The Holy Grail? Right? When they attack the French castle, right? Run away, run away. They're kind of like those kind of people. They see conflict, they run. Now, maybe it's because it's a personality trait, or maybe they had a lot of conflict in their family growing up, and they just don't want anything to do with it, or they just don't want conflict, and so they see it, and they hear it, and they run. But the problem is they kind of pretend it's not there. Right? When you run from conflict, you're saying, yeah, nothing to see here, it's all good, it's fine, nothing here, right? It's good. Or you tell a joke to kind of lighten the mood, or maybe you change the subject. How about those Cubs this year? Looking good, right? We kind of change things because we don't want to actually deal with conflict. They'd rather choose to ignore honesty so they can ignore conflict. And the problem with that is that conflict doesn't go away, it goes underground. It kind of begins to fester and to build because they've kind of ignored it. Like those mountains or those clouds you see over the mountains in the east. Like this afternoon, right? If you look out the east, you're going to see these big, huge, cumulus clouds rising as they come off of the rim and they head toward the valley in that warm air. They're going to rise and rise and get bigger and bigger and balloon up. What's going to happen? It's going to rain down in your backyard, knock over your patio chairs and your umbrellas and put stuff in your pool. It'd be that kind of thing. Well, it happens. It's going to come out at some point. That's the avoiders. The other group are the attackers. I would ask you to raise your hand if you're an attacker, but I don't want to make you mad. Attackers, those people that kind of like, they don't run, they rumble. The voice in their head doesn't say, run away. The voice in their head says, bring it on. Right? They want to actually attack and get involved in that fight. They're the ones who are going to make that quick-witted comeback. Now, the truth is, and I can tell you what attackers do, but they'll speak for themselves or else. But the thing is that most of us, the honest truth is, we're kind of between the two, most often. Sometimes we're the avoiders. Sometimes we're the attackers. Sometimes we run. Sometimes we rumble. It just depends on the situation, the personalities, what the situation is, the topic is. So that's not interesting either. Like the list. We've all got ways of responding, but what I want to talk about today is a third way. Because, the thing is, if you run, or you rumble, or you attack, or you avoid, you're not solving the problem, right? If you attack, you're not solving anything. So how can we get to a point where we actually are trying to solve the problems that are created in conflict? How do we make it better than just avoid it or attack it? Well, Jesus offers a third way, and it's one of these flipped upside down things that he talks about throughout the New Testament. In John 16, Jesus is about to leave his disciples. He's heading to his trial, and the crucifixion's coming up, and he says this. He says, you're going to have some problems. So I have said this to you so that in me you might have peace. In this world you will face persecution, but take courage, I have conquered the world. He says, look, in this world, the way it is, you're going to have trouble. You're going to have conflict. You're going to have persecution. That stuff's going to happen. Avoiders, guess what? You can't avoid it. Attackers, you can attack all day long, it's not going to solve it. In this world, he says, you will have problems. You'll have problems. But then he goes on and says, but I've said this to you so that you may have peace. The solution isn't attacking or avoiding. He says the solution is peace. I have said these things to you so that, and the ultimate goal is not to avoid or attack. The ultimate goal is to have what? Peace. Now, what does that look like? Because like we said a few weeks ago, we look at language and words. They mean different things to different people. The word peace meant something different to Jesus than it kind of does to us today. We think of peace as something that is very different than what their concept was. In John 14:7, Jesus says, peace I leave with you. My peace I give to you. I do not give as the world gives. He said, the world gives a different kind of peace. I give a different kind of peace. The peace the world gives is what I call a world in pieces. What I mean by that is this. The peace of the world is a world in pieces. That we want to get to our corners. Like if we're fighting, you go here, you go there. You go in timeout. Go to your corners. Get away. Stop. Armistice. We think of peace as the absence of fighting and the absence of conflict. But the reality is you're still in pieces. You're still broken. You're still all spread out all over the place. Jesus says, I offer you a different kind of peace. And it's not the absence of anything. It's the presence of something better. It's a presence that he gives us. And in the Old Testament, there's a word for peace, and you probably know this word. It's shalom. Shalom. And the word doesn't necessarily mean being broken apart and stop fighting. It means to be present and whole, complete. The word shalom isn't sending your kid to the timeout. It's the kid when it comes back and the relationship's restored. That's peace. And sometimes that kind of peace, that shalom type peace, requires arguments. It requires conflict. It requires debate. Because it requires a relationship to be put back together. Shalom is not you go to your corners and we don't talk anymore. Shalom is we got to sit down and work this out. And that's the kind of peace that Jesus is talking about here. So in Matthew 5:9, our seventh of these Beatitudes, he says, blessed are the peacemakers, for they'll be called children of God. Blessed are the peacemakers. It's not just blessed is peace. Blessed are you when you don't fight. Blessed are you when you work for peace. And that takes effort, right? I mean, to live for peace, to act for peace, to speak out for peace, to ache for peace. And that happens all over the place in your life, not just, on battlefields per se, but in your families, with your coworkers, in your car, in your conversations, the conference room, in your city, in your state, in your nation. Work, actually making the effort to work for peace. We live in a world right now, we all know this, that's incredibly divided. I don't think anybody would debate that. It's a very divided, angry, split up, broken up world. Not just globally, but in our own communities as well. what God wants from us, to be a child of God, which we just sang about, right? I want to be a child of God. Well, then good. You need to work for peace, and that's going to take effort and courage and determination and strength and even sacrifice. The Apostle Paul was a leader of the church, wrote most of the New Testament, who started a lot of new churches. And when the church started, right after Jesus had gone back to heaven, there's a lot of conflict of how they're going to live and how would they react and how would they act together. And so he had to deal with a lot of conflict, and you see this in his letters. And in Romans 12, he wrote this: "If it is possible, so far as depends on you, live peaceably with all." And I think he reveals something in here that's super important for you today. Because I'm telling you, being a peacemaker is necessary but difficult. And it's frustrating too. Because it says right here, as far as depends upon you. What's the flip side of that? It doesn't always depend upon you. Right? No matter what you do sometimes, there'll be people in your life that don't want to work for peace. They're not going to want to help. No matter how much you try, how much mercy you show, how much compassion, how much you try to communicate, they are simply not going to want to listen or to help. They're not going to want shalom. They're not going to want peace. And there's not a single thing you can do about it. It's the reality. I mean, I hate to say that. And the thing is, you shouldn't feel bad about that. But what you can do, what you need to do, what I need to do is this: as far as depends on you, you can work on this part. I can't change them, but I can do it as far as it depends upon me. I'll do whatever I can do to work for peace. I'll do the best job that I can do. I can't change them, and maybe the relationship won't be fixed. It just won't, because they don't want to fix it. But as far as it depends upon me, I'll do what I can. So Paul recognizes the fact that sometimes you do the best you can, it's not going to work out. You're not going to find peace. But as far as it depends upon you, you and I should act as a child of God. So let's look at it this way. As far as it depends upon you, you and I each have 2 buckets. Make it really super simple because it's summertime, right? So you got 2 buckets. In one bucket, you got water. And the other bucket, you've got gas. Okay, red bucket's gas, white bucket's water. Okay, everyone's got 2 buckets. I've got 2 buckets. You have 2 buckets. Everyone's got 2 buckets. Okay, this part 2. Everywhere you go, there's going to be, hold on a second. This is fancy. There's fire. Isn't that cool? It's warm. Okay, everywhere you go, there's fire. It could be a little fire, a little ember, burning somewhere. It could be a forest fire, something big. But everywhere you go, there's going to be a fire. Third part is this: as far as it depends upon you, which bucket are you going to use? Maybe you're on Facebook, right, and you have conversations going on. It's got you hot under the collar. And it's so easy behind that computer to post something that is more like this than like this. So each of us have these 2 buckets. One's got gas. Now, if I put gas on the fire, what happens? Right, it's huge explosion, fireball, looks cool, right? It's like boom, it's bright and shiny, like those quick comebacks from Winston Churchill, right? It's like boom, goes up, then it's exciting and all that stuff. But what happens afterwards? All you got is charred, burnt, ruined mess. And you see a fire, when there's like a fire out, in Arizona, and you see the kind of charred ground, it takes a while for that to come back, doesn't it? You drive through a forest that's been burned. You see those trees all black. It's going to take a while for that to come back. Well, sometimes when we throw gas on these fires and it explodes, it feels good for a second. We got them back. I got what I wanted to say out. But it doesn't fix anything. It can make it worse. And it can leave the world in an uglier place. What we need is some more water bucket type people. People that are willing to bring water to the fire. Peacemakers do that. The problem with the white bucket, though, is how do you get the water in the bucket? Right? And sometimes, many times, as far as it depends upon you means the bucket is full of tears. Right? That it takes sacrifice and work and heartache to put the water in the bucket to help put out the fire. That's the hard part of being a peacemaker. It's going to cost you something. We don't, if you think of peace as just stopping and separating, it's kind of a negative thing. You just kind of get apart. But to work for peace and resolving conflict means you got to sacrifice. You got to put the effort in. It might cause you some pain as well. But Jesus says, blessed are the peacemakers, for they'll be called children of God. That's what God does. I mean, think about it. What did it cost God to make peace with us? I mean, that's Jesus came. He came and he said he came here to make peace between us and God. And that cost God something. It cost his tears. It cost the life of his son to make peace with us. But that's what God did. He came and saw conflict with us, and he made peace. When Jesus died and he came back to his disciples. And where were they? They were hiding out. Right? They were out in an upper room. They were scared. They were alone. They're hiding out. They don't know what's going to happen to them. Their friend had just died. Their leader had died. And they were hiding out, not helping. Jesus comes back. He could have been mad. Right? He could have had every right to use this bucket. They deserved it. We deserved it. They had betrayed him, denied him, ran and hid when he needed them. They slept when he said, please don't sleep and just stay awake with me. They did all that. And he comes back. You know what the first thing he says to them? It says in John 20:21, peace be with you. First thing. He comes back, and through his own pain and his own suffering, he comes back and he brings peace. We're going to share communion here in a second, and that's what that meal is all about. I mean, yeah, we take bread and we break it into little pieces, and we share it. Those little pieces remind us that he came to bring us real peace. He came to make us whole. He was broken to make us whole and to bring us peace with God. Let's pray together.